Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Her Story TV and the Her Story podcast. This is Gertrude Macha here in beautiful Melbourne, Australia this time. I'm blessed to have the pleasure of yet another amazing guest. Welcome, welcome, welcome to our tribe. Please tell everybody your full name, where you're based, how old you are, and share your story with us today.
Thank you, Gertrude. Pleasure to be on the podcasting show. My name's Bhavna Patel. I'm based in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast here in Australia. And I'm 40. And my story, really, I would have to say the biggest thing that started me on the journey that I'm on now is, two elements, but I'll pick one, my health and the passing of my brother. So my brother passed away. My younger brother, who was a year and a half younger than me, passed away when he was 18 and I was 20. And this was from a brain tumor, his second brain tumor in 4 years. And the second one was quite aggressive. So from symptomatic to passing was about a month. So it was quite a shock. But I have to say, like, the last month that I had with him, he was a beautiful brother. After having had a surprise birthday party for his 18th, he was very appreciative and very kind and loving. But what this actually did for me, some of the things that I experienced through that process, the acknowledgement of his actual death, so seeing his body in the hospital, I actually had no emotion. Like, I didn't feel anything. I was in so much shock, reflecting on it, that there was nothing, and people were hugging me, family members were hugging me, saying so sorry, and I just didn't feel anything. Going to work a couple of weeks afterwards, I just didn't feel anything. And it wasn't until, so we have culturally rituals that we perform for the dead, and rituals as we do for many other things in life. It wasn't until the body was brought back to the family home for doing the death rites that I absolutely broke down. I couldn't, the second my brother, my dad, my older brother, my dad, my cousins left to go and get the body, I just went into a state of sobbing, and I could not control it. One of my cousins had to help me actually do my part of the rituals. My aunt was consoling me, trying to just show me some of the things that were happening, I guess more spiritually, more energetically. And crying for us, when a person passes, there's the belief around that is that you know when you cry, you keep the spirit of that person attached to this plane, so they can't actually move on. So there was almost this conflict of, I can't stop crying, but I don't want him obviously to not be able to move on. So it took a while on that day to get myself composed again and just to stop crying. But it was a breaking point for me, because as a child, I don't actually, and through my teenage years, I don't ever remember crying about anything. So I was not a crier in any shape or form that I can remember. And it wasn't until that day, literally the floodgates opened. But what did that do for me? That led me down a path of, so my brother, he was on his way and had applied to go to university. He was wanting to study architecture, and his month in hospital, he was constantly asking about whether he'd received any letters from the universities he'd applied to, what they said, has he had it, every time we went in, has there been a letter, has there been a letter? So there was a lot of drive in him wanting to, completely not acknowledging the fact that he was actually going to pass. And one thing that I remember happening on the night before he actually passed, he was trying to, so we were using an alphabet chart to communicate with him, and he was blinking for the letters. And he was actually spelling out to me, when am I going to Mumbai? Because doctors in Mumbai had said that they would operate, but in the UK they said it was too risky and they wouldn't do it. But we'd gone past the stage of him being able to get onto a plane. I couldn't figure out what he was trying to spell, because it was only very recently that the Mumbai had become Mumbai from Bombay. But I feel like my dad realized, and he sent me out, and there were some other family members coming into the room, and it wasn't, I sat down in the waiting area and realized what he was actually trying to spell to me and what he was asking. And that, I think, was part of the cracking me open. But what's happened as a result of that, I did a lot of living my life. When I started living my life, he didn't have a chance to do this, so I'm going to do as much as I possibly can. And that was one of my big drivers for a lot of the travel that I've done. Through my 20s, moving to Australia from London. There was a heart calling, but again, he wasn't able to do this, so I'm doing this for him. And actually not until probably a few years ago, I've let that go, and in kind of almost receiving message from him that you need to live your life for you. This is not about me, this is about you. Which again opened the floodgates, and had me crying for a little while. Just the acknowledgement that yes, this is for me. And as much as I can enjoy the experiences and have experiences that I can call him in and be in thought and thinking of him when I'm doing it. It's my experience, and I need to live my life for the enjoyment of my life and get as much out of it for me, not for him. But it was a wonderful trigger. It was an unfortunate event, obviously, but it was a massive trigger for me, or stepping stone for me was probably a better word, to really expand, my experience of the world and of life.
Wow. It sounds to me like you have been on quite a spiritual journey with this whole experience. And you've kind of come out on the other side with so much wisdom and so much knowledge. You and I share something very, very similar, in that I also lost a younger brother in 2009. And there is something that happens when we lose such a close family member. For me, it felt like he gave me back my life. He gave me a reason to live again. I did some crazy things the year that he died. I'm afraid of heights, but I went skydiving. I bungee jumped off the Victoria Falls Bridge, the highest bridge and waterfall in Africa. I went deep sea diving, and I don't know how to swim. But every single fear that I had about living came out of the passing of my brother. He literally gave me a license to live again. So a lot of people are experiencing these kind of trauma right now. With COVID-19, we're losing loved ones. We're not near them to be with them. We're not able to bury our relatives. Like, I had lost my mom last year in April. From what life has taught you up to this point, can you give 3 nuggets of wisdom in terms of how to deal with grief and handle grief?
And thank you. Such a good question. And I recently, or probably last year, had a conversation with somebody who challenged my, it's a circle of life perspective to some information they were sharing. And again, going back to that cultural element, religiously, I'm a Hindu, and as a Hindu, I believe in, we believe in reincarnation.
Yes.
And I'm probably don't follow Hindu practices as much as I maybe did when I was a child, and challenge all things, literally all things spiritual, non-spiritual, and science. Is just who I am. Yes. But from a spiritual perspective as well, like, I fully believe that source, my soul, my spirit is connected to everything and is infinite. It's beyond my body.
Mm.
So the challenge that I had with this old colleague was that, well, how can you believe, how can you think death is okay when you're promoting health and wellness and eating good? And I was like, of course we should exercise, we should eat well, because
Mm.
that's loving this body, that's loving
Yes.
this body and this life. But the acceptance of death is so paramount in moving beyond the fear of it, because it
Yes.
allows you and gives you permission to live. And that's
It's
really,
interesting. Sorry to cut you off.
yeah, that's okay.
The most inevitable thing about life is death. They're two sides of the same coin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yet we live in fear of the coming of death.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are fearful, but it's one of the most inevitable things. Nobody's going to check out of this life alive. We're all going to go at some point. It's just a matter of when, correct?
Correct,
Mm.
exactly. And I think that's when you, and I have, I feel probably most recently in the last couple of years, I mean, it's before COVID, but I feel like I've fully liberated myself from it. And
Mm.
I can reflect on, if I went outside and got hit by a car and that was it, how do I feel about that?
Mm.
I
Mm.
feel okay. It's like, if that's when I was meant to go, or if that's
Yeah.
what, I chose for myself, that this was the end of my journey,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay.
Mm.
And there's a lot of peace that comes with that. But
Yeah.
again, like that permission to live, because we are experiencing the world from a fear-based state at the moment, which actually
Mhm.
results in us not living.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
if you, even pre-COVID, if you think about, well, what was keeping you bound to your normal day-to-day, or locked in this pattern? What was keeping you locked in that? Because it's comfortable, because it's known.
Yes.
Because if you do something different, something dangerous might happen. But doing something different is the human experience. Like,
Yeah.
that is the human experience. So for
And
those
that's why
people
we
that are,
came. That's why we're here to
yeah,
experience life to its full.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
And for people, losing loved ones, of course, there's sadness in that, and the decisions that people are making. My family's in London. My parents, my brothers, my older brother, my sister, and their kids, they're all in London.
Right.
Um, so I actually reflected on this only a couple of days ago, to be honest.
Mm.
What would happen if they passed?
Yeah.
And I felt, and I was like, I'm at peace with that. Yes, there
Mm.
would be sadness. There would be sadness,
Yeah.
and I would grieve, and I know that I would grieve. But this is what they chose.
Mm.
and and then a little part of my ego says, well, I told them to come out and move to Australia, and it's a better life here, and all of these other things. Like, it would mean that I was close to them and my nieces and my nephew, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't have this problem. So then my ego does that little conversation, but it's like, no, they live where they live, and they're living the life that they're living. And should anything ever happen to them, yes, I would experience sadness, and of course I would want to be able to go home.
Yeah.
I think even the resolve around that is challenging, and I've seen lots of people having conversations in various social feeds and groups who are from the UK in particular, and are losing
Mm.
family members in the UK, and yourself, with your mother. She's in Africa. She's still, yeah. So
Mm.
that distance makes it incredibly challenging
Hard.
to grieve with your family,
Yeah.
um, to grieve for your loved one, and obviously to perform the ceremony that is part of our, it's part of our ritual and
Mm.
our honoring for that person's life. So there is challenge obviously behind that, and I can sense it even in myself. It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to do all of those things if
Mhm.
any one of my family members pass away.
Yes.
And there's tightness and there's tension, and I can feel that. But equally, I can also feel that, well, I'm still always connected to them.
Yeah.
I know the deepness of my connection to my family souls and to my family spirits, and
Yes.
they're beyond the physical body. I guess in terms of practical tools, because they're really helpful. Practical
Mhm.
tools is, with the distance, do something that honors that person's life. Every year I go to a church, a temple, or somewhere in nature to in memory of my brother on the
Yeah.
anniversary of his death. I just do something that's allows me some quiet reflection to think
Mhm.
on his memory, and to hold a lot of blessing around wherever his spirit and soul is now. So that practical exercise, actually going through the motions of doing a ritual for
Mhm.
honoring them, and that gives you space to go into the thought of gratitude, reflect on your experience, reflect on the
Mhm.
love that you have for them, and just be with them in
It's
energetically, spiritually.
it's interesting. I was having a conversation with one of my cousins in Zimbabwe the other day, whose wife recently passed, and she died after a long illness with a liver malfunction, and after years of just suffering. Really, she died a
Mm,
couple of weeks ago, and he's struggling coming to terms with her passing. And he said to me, Gertrude, I never knew a day, 24 hours could be this long.
mm,
And just dealing with the emotions of that. So let's talk a little bit about emotions. I was reading a book the other day that said our emotions are like our children. And when they come, we need to bring them closer to us
mm,
and just sit with them for a while. A lot of times when you're experiencing grief, you want the feeling to go away. You want to push
mm,
away from the feeling, but emotions come and go. And when you sit in the sadness for a while, it passes
mm,
through you. And one of the things I said to him, just from experience, because I've lost like three major people in my life in the last 24 months. I lost my dad, I lost my mother in law, I lost my mother. And I said to him, you have to sit with it, because the more you push against it, the more it comes.
mhm,
It's really like paying attention to your kids. If your children come to you, you will never push them away.
mm,
They will come, they will bug you, they'll bother you, they want your attention. So you have to give them your attention, and it passes.
yeah.
After a few minutes, that feeling will pass. How have you been able to deal with your emotions when you were dealing with grief?
Well, in that particular situation, I mean, it was 20 years ago, so I wasn't as well equipped with the tools that I have now.
Mm,
Um, but even now, I mean, grief is not just it's not only the physical death of a person. It could be the death and the end of a relationship. It could,
mm,
or a friendship, or the end of a business. There's
yeah,
grief that comes with that too,
yeah.
which I know so many people are, so many people are
Experiencing.
experiencing.
Mm,
Um, and as far as the emotions go, you're absolutely right. Acknowledgement. I think the acknowledgement is really important, because it's feedback to you.
mhm,
So when you're feeling sadness, acknowledging that there's sadness. And one of the tools that I've shared with lots of people is, holding the emotion out in your palm, and just holding it and saying, okay, thank you, sadness. What message do you have for me? And in acknowledging the emotion, and then opening yourself up to any wisdom that it has for you.
yeah, yeah. And
And
being
then,
open, you're right, because there is something that you do get from these experiences.
mhm,
There definitely is something there.
yeah,
So, what would be your parting thoughts, message, ideas to anybody out there who's needing help and support at
yeah.
this moment in time?
I would definitely say, doing that exact process. So acknowledging the emotions that are coming up for you, opening yourself up to any information, messages that they have to share with you, and being grateful for them. So holding gratitude, saying thank you, and that you let them go. And that's a really, really important. And of course, in such a time of separation, or we're being separated by through the lockdowns, it's really important to phone, to video call, if you've got loved ones in your family, to hold and just be with them. That connection really helps to release. It creates releases of endorphins and happy serotonin in our body, particularly when we can embrace people and hold people. Um, Release of the love hormone, which is exactly what we need right now. And for your own physical health, to move those emotions through your body, being active, being physically active. When you think about the hormones that are released during grief and any kind of stress, fear, they just say stay stuck in your body if you're not really, really like shaking them out or doing some spiritual energetic process to release them. So exercising is super important at the moment. Do as much as you can, particularly cardio stuff, because
Yes.
that's really going to burn off and release those hormones and chemicals from your body. But sit with yourself, give your time, give yourself, the space to process.
And
Give
I
yourself
do
the
love what you said a bit earlier about gratitude. I started a gratitude journal where I would wake up every morning and just write down 10 things I'm grateful for every single day. And it could be as simple as I opened my eyes this morning and I can see. I took in some air and I can breathe. We take a lot of things for granted, a lot of things
absolutely.
for granted. So thank you so much for coming online today and sharing your nuggets of wisdom with us. We
Thank
had
you.
Mandy tuning in from Canada. She said she did the same trek from the UK to Canada. Thank you, Mandy, and thank you for the sympathies that you shared with Bhavna. Really appreciate your being here. So yes, death is the same side of life. It's the other side of the
Mm,
coin. And I think in difficult times like this, we get to make the choice to celebrate our loved ones. I'm saying to people now, every conversation counts. Every time you can get
absolutely.
on a Zoom call with a sister or a father or a
Hmm.
mother, speak to them as if it was the last time you will speak to them, because you never know. Thank you so much. And thank you for everybody who's tuned in. I'll be back again tomorrow with
Thank
yet
you.
another amazing guest. Have a fantastic day wherever you are in the world. And thank you again, Bhavna. Really
Thank
appreciated
you.
this interview.
Thank you,
Bye for now,
Gertrude. Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.